Welcome back. You're watching the Power Breakfast Show live on Citizen TV. We're now well into the second hour of our newspaper review right here. Many thanks indeed to all of you who are talking to us and engaging on the topics. Of course, the state of the nation as we are, talking to us on 22422 and on social media, the hashtag Power Breakfast, the handles at Citizen TV Kenya on Twitter and Facebook. I will read some more SMSs shortly, but before that, just before the break, I know that Odoyo Willie wanted to respond to what Honorable Elachi was talking about. Odoyo, I can give you this moment to do so.
Thank you, Baigwa. She talked about all other elections in Kenya went through the same process and the elections should have been nullified. I want to let her know that all these cases are in court as of now, and probably they will all be nullified. Talking about MCAs not having gone to court, this is a financial issue. It has nothing to do whether theirs was done well or not. But also remember, MCAs cases are done at the grassroots there. They are counted and then declared there and then. But this other one had to come all the way. But let me come in on the matter of ICT. I think we are now treating ourselves as ignorant about ICT too much. This whole system of IEDC was what we call a network in ICT, with the center at the servers. It goes out in 290 branches to the constituencies. Out of there, it goes out in several branches to the polling centers. After the voting was to be done in the polling centers, it had to be submitted through this system to the server and then displayed. The very reason why NASA went to court, let me repeat this, is to prove that what was being displayed there was the same thing that came from the polling centers. The only way to prove this was to have a printout log from the server of all this information coming in. That is the same way you would prove that who called me in the whole week. You have to go to Safaricom, and from their servers they would print out those who called you, those who sent you SMSs. This is something that Jubilee resisted with all their might. They resisted it at all costs. And even after the court had given an order that these servers be scrutinized, they brought in the idea that, you see, these servers are in Europe and those people are still sleeping. Servers don't sleep, that is why your phones work throughout the night. Servers don't sleep, that is why ATMs work throughout the night. Logging into a server just need a password, the same password they used to interfere with these servers. So we must not talk about things like, oh, the election should have not been nullified because of small errors that could have not changed the result. That result was the reason why we went to court, because it was a fake result. If it was a true result, we would have not nullified it. And Raila Odinga did not go to court about the difference between his votes and Uhuru Kenyatta's votes. He went that the results that were there were fake. When they are fake, it means even if they are 10 million or 100 million, they are fake. Even if they are only 2, they are fake.
Allow me to interrupt you. Wait, just a minute.
Hang on 1 second. I'd mentioned before the break that we want to talk about moving this discussion forward, not dwelling too much on what happened in the past, because that's been discussed comprehensively over the last few weeks or so, but rather moving forward. And I wanted to ask you something, Odoyo, before I come to you, Honorable Elachi. I wanted to find out from you, in terms of transparency, what do you hope to see in the ICT process around the upcoming polls? Because that is a discussion we need to start having. Briefly, because I need to allow all the other panelists to weigh in.
I voted at Nyahera Primary School.
Okay.
I wanted to sit there and see the votes counted, and we get 800 from there. And then when I look at the screen, I see Nyahera Primary School at the constituency level showing 900 votes. And when I come to Bomas, I see my constituency Kasipul showing 59,000 votes being added to the total that is there. This transparency was removed by IEBC so that they could keep figures which Kenyans don't know about, which do not express the will of Kenyans. That transparency is in Article 86.
The example you've given us, that is what actually happened. Is that what you're saying? Or you're saying that is what happened?
Show where these votes came from. This is why you wanted to show.
Honorable Elachi, come in.
Okay, first of all, since he understands ICT, now he needs to explain to us.
Yes.
When I enter as a voter, and I think the KIMs are even more important than all these other things we are talking about. Yes. Because if we really wanted to engage and understand how many people voted in this polling station, I wish, as you say, the expertise were there, they would say, let us get an example of just one KIMS. If you print out, you will have known how many people walked in even without asking IEBC, if you did a printout of the KIMS, it would have given us, in this polling station, we had 50 people who walked it, because remember there were small streams. Now when you say that immediately after, when we close and we are counting the votes, definitely we started with the votes for the president. And we knew very well that when you count, the president had maybe 49 votes. And we come to the next, the governor, this vote. We come to the next, we find ourselves with the woman rep, this vote. We find ourselves with the MP, this vote. We find ourselves with the MCA who you're saying, his vote came out, yes, and it was okay. But all these votes are announced in that polling station.
Yes.
And then from there, we agree, all of us seated, we sign that form 34. We agree.
That's correct.
And it is scanned on the scheme.
Yes.
Why didn't we call this scheme? Because it is a very important kit. It is the one that now transfers this results from here to now where you're saying. And for me, when you say at the end in Bomas we see 59, I believe before the 59, there are those small votes. The 50 that came from stream 1, stream 2 to 19 streams are taken differently, randomly, without saying this one has gone how, and without putting them together. So what happened? And that is where I think you're thinking, in all that we needed to have seen only 59,000. But we agreed, all of us, before the elections, that every stream will send its results. So if it is 200, send your 200. And that is what my Nakiai was given, that if I want 50 votes from this stream, let the 50 from Mudangari Primary School get to the headquarters as 50 or as whatever we have agreed. But my question goes back again, because nobody talks about this scheme, the schemes we used, yet they are very critical in the whole process, if we are talking about process. And they are the ones, in fact, that can tell us whether indeed we did the right thing in our elections, starting from the president to these other members who are also part of the process, or we did wrong.
Hold on, I need to allow some of the other guests to weigh in on this. Honorable Mohammed, I know that your expertise is legal and maybe not necessarily ICT, but I'm sure you have lots of insights on this as well. Can I allow you now to come in?
Yeah, and I think moving on from where Speaker has stopped, the polling station then delivered their information to the constituency tallying center. And remember, these are very contested activities. It's not like some officer or some clerk is sitting in a back room failing this stuff. It is in a very hotly contested, and anybody who has gone through elections knows that's one of the most difficult times of your life. Everybody is sitting around, they are delivering that information. So again, you have a second layer of confirmation. So your agents are there, the candidates for MPs are there, all the candidates for the ward reps are there. You go through the same process. This polling station brought this information, it's entered. The other one brought this. You collect them, you sign them. If you have a problem with them, you indicate why you have a problem with them. Verification, confirmation, collected, that is sent as Form 34B. Meaning Form 34B includes everything that Form 34A had. That is also sent. Now, those are the different layers of confirmation. If you have a problem with Bomas Tallying Center, whether it is through servers or through the transmission system or whatever, that is fine. The next problematic issue, as I had said earlier, is since you have several other layers of confirmation, why then jump to the conclusion? And this is really the elephant in the room, and I think you had touched on it earlier. It's because of our political environment. We as a country have invested over the last decades on mistrust, and when you invest on mistrust, you get mistrust. We have the most expensive elections in the world, bar none. Per capita, our elections are the most expensive.
That's correct.
The Supreme Court said elections should be simple. Our elections are not simple. The actual voting is simple, but the processes are so problematic. Remember the nomination process. Mheshimiwa talked about it earlier. The nomination process, that is part of the process. Our elections are very complicated. I think what we should be doing,
I wanted to ask you that,
is simplifying these processes. Now, when we were offline, Mheshimiwa talked about something very interesting. He said, look, all servers, even for banks, are outside, and that you don't need to bring the server physically here. You need access. That triggered something in my mind. Look, when you go to your bank, you put your money there. You don't go behind and ask, let me see your server, let me see who your officer is, let me see who actually, and it's not just in banks. When you go to hospital, you don't ask the doctor, bring your certificate. How many people have you operated on? I need to be. Or when you take your kids to school, you don't ask the teacher, you know, by the way, do you have any report about whether you bet up kids before? Or people will think you are nuts. We unfortunately, when it comes to our elections, we have made that the key business. I remember I was in Bunge, and I remember we were amending laws up to a few days to the elections. Here we are doing cases 35 days to the election. We have watchmen over watchmen. Most sane countries don't have commissions that take such a huge chunk of our budget doing elections. In fact, in the UK, it's a mid-level civil servant in the Ministry of the Interior. It's the local authorities that do the processes. Imagine if we were to go back as a country and say, let this be done by the normal civil service. And people would say that is absolutely normal, and people can kill each other for. I think that is really where the problem lies. That we as a country should step back and decide that elections are important, but there is so much more to life than just elections. We have lives to lead. We are not just political party members. We are parents, we are business people, we are professionals, we are citizens, and all those other things have to be done. Elections are critical. Let us verify our elections. It's important. Those are decisions. But if you decide, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you decide, I am going to, there is a problem here, there is always a problem here, you will then believe your own prophecy, and it will come true.
You have used Honorable Okello's example during the break in part of your narrative. I need to give him a chance now to tell us whether his example has been used correctly. To respond to that as well.
Or it has been hacked.
Chances are that it has been hacked. But allow me to backpedal a bit. My brother Abdikadir brought an important matter here regarding the what they call procedural technicalities, and I want to refer to a case that took a lot of our press space at the time, when Matiba filed a case before the court, and he was expected by the edict of the law then to personally sign the petition. Yet he was indisposed.
Absolutely.
So as a result, therefore, he gave his wife to sign on his behalf.
There you go.
And the matter was dismissed.
There you go.
Just on that simple procedural technicalities. Of course, many years later, the judge had to pay the ultimate price. He was fired by the judges and vetting board. So, you know, this kind of very funny technicality. And that is why, Mr. Wahiga, if you look at our constitution, a whole chapter 4, has been dedicated to the Bill of Rights. And you look at all the other remaining chapters, they draw their strength and mirror what is espoused in chapter 4 of the Kenyan Constitution. And that was done for a very, very good reason. Now, the narrative that I have to debunk here is that the Supreme Court said that it is IEBC to conduct the next round of election. No one is disputing that. What the Supreme Court has not said is that the same officials who bungled the election should again be given another opportunity. That they did not say. But let me move forward. When a case is filed, all parties are given adequate amount of time, adequate amount of opportunity to file their responses. And in order for a fair hearing to be reached, I want to believe Jubilee Party had an opportunity to ask for scrutiny and recount of those disputed votes in the impound election. They didn't do that, but there they're saying NASA ought to have helped them prove their case beyond any reasonable doubt so that they win. That is not the work of NASA. NASA would want to put you on the defense so that the election is nullified as it was, so that we go back to another second round of election. So that has to be put into perspective. You asked about what the president meant by asking Parliament to carry out further legislation on certain fundamental issues surrounding elections. Let me tell you, we can read the president's mind very well. What he's actually saying is asking us to go and abandon the judiciary, because he has fired salvos,
he has called them all sorts of names, and he has expressed his unwillingness to transact with the judiciary in this country. We will not do that. And by the way, it is very important that that is an aspect that has to go back to the people by way of a referendum. And I know Kenyans who will trash, if at all, because there are several processes through which a bill must be subjected to a referendum. So it will die on arrival. Another thing, Wahiga, that has to be made clear. Even by the documents that were scrutinized by the court officials, Jubilee, NASA, as regards the elections, of course, most of those documents were fake, and it was proven beyond doubt. But 577,000 people voted over and above all other elective positions. And what was the answer? The answer was simple from Jubilee, that number one, those who are in prison are only allowed to vote for the president, plus those who are within the diaspora. How many are they? Those in diaspora are 5,000. Those who were in prison at the time were 4,000 people. So that only affected 9,000. How did they have to explain the remainder? 568,000 votes. And when this question was put to them, they called them statistics. And they still expected Maraga, in all his wisdom and all his fidelity to the Constitution and the fear of God, to uphold that election. My goodness, are we living somewhere which is not the Republic of Kenya?
Let me pause you there now. I know Odoyo has been waiting to weigh in on this as well. You can go ahead now.
I wanted to respond to Honorable Speaker. That is a good name for her. She was talking about this ICT
You've
thing.
not congratulated her.
I have already done. We know each other.
The Kims. I need to understand the Kims.
Yes. Okay. When we have that Kims at the polling station, it is used purely for identification and then transmission, isn't it? Those people at the polling station are unable to see what goes on in there. So when Raila Odinga took his case to court, he needed the forms to see that from this polling station, I had 200 votes, Uhuru Kenyatta had 900, and they were transmitted, isn't it? He wanted to confirm this same thing is the one transmitted up here. But remember, in 2013 and 2007, we could see where the votes had come from. Tharaka Nithi, 204, even though the voters registered were fewer. So that you can actually audit this thing as you watch. But this time they started to be opaque, exactly going against Article 86. So when we went to court as NASA, the argument was, can you prove that what we have here that has been used to declare President Uhuru Kenyatta the president is the same votes that came from the polling stations countrywide? The only way is to get a printout how they came in and from where they come. When you call Safaricom today, Safaricom knows very well this call has come from Beatrice Elachi from her number. That server also knows where all this has come from. But you remember, all these things were switched off on 5th. They never got here. The results which were here had nothing to do with the votes we cast at the polling stations. So when you say you cannot nullify an election on the basis of technicalities, there was not this thing that was being nullified was not the election. The election remained at the polling stations and the constituency. They were never transmitted here. If they were transmitted here, IEBC and the Jubilee would have accepted the logs to be printed so that we see that from your constituency, Dagoretti, whatever it is, then this number of votes came for Uhuru Kenyatta here. That they refused. In fact, they said that if that is what happened, let's go back to the election.
So let me just ask Wahiga.
Briefly,
and then allow me to answer direct.
I want us to help Kenyans.
Yes.
Because a Kenyan is asking himself or herself, why am I using these schemes? How does it help my country not to enter again into this challenge? And that is what I want you to, as an expert, to answer them. Because when you say it remained at the polling station, it means, my same question is valid, that if we bring the Kims, we can solve our problem as a country. If the results remained at the polling station, it means the results are still in that Kims. If you open the Kims of that polling station, you'll be able to know how many people voted, how many, what results were sent to IBC, to the tallying center at the constituency, at the county, and at the National Tallying Center.
Honorable Speaker, I don't want your question to become a comment. Let me allow Odoyo to weigh in.
Can I weigh in just before he comes in?
Okay.
I want to allow the others to weigh in. Odoyo, 1 minute, please, to respond.
Let me tell you, Beatrice. This KIEMS kit, first of all, it's used for identification.
Yes.
So that you don't vote twice, so that we see if you are registered or not. But remember, if that did not work, we had a manual identification.
A complementary system.
Yes, a complementary system. So this one was not going. What was going to work best was, after all this have been done, we record it in Form 34A that we expected to stay there. We called all these Form 34As to compare with what is in the server here. This server, they refuse to let us compare it. And so don't bring even the KIEMS. That doesn't work here. Because it only works on the day of the election. After that, it is of no use. We go to the records, which we kept. And these records, some of them were fake.
Honorable Abdikadir?
Yeah, thank you very much. And we had agreed we go away from the technical
Yes,
stuff.
we had.
But let me now that has been the center of this, because I think the country really needs to look at, instead of focusing on what went wrong, and to see how we move forward in terms of a more positive future. But let me come back to a number of issues that have been raised. First, the question that Speaker is asking. Was the Supreme Court interested in holding that IEBC had messed, or was the Supreme Court being asked to nullify the elections, and that was the subject matter of the petition? If this was that IEBC did not do its work, that's fine. But if it was nullify the election, you have different streams of evidence. Number one, no problem, let it be the server. Number two, there is electronic equipment in every polling station, which is also substantial evidence, which is accessible to the court. Number three, and most importantly, our elections are actually manual. The actual voting, when you walk in, as I said earlier, when you walk in, you don't push a button, you don't press push a lever or press a button. You actually take a physical document, physically sign it, put in a physical box, they are physically removed, they are physically counted, and there is a physical entry of the results. Forget about how now it has been transmitted, but up to that point, that evidence is still there. So
yes,
if you are really interested in whether this thing happened or not, and the gentleman on my left keep on repeating fake, if you want to prove that it was fake, that is the evidence. It is not that IEBC failed. IEBC failed raises the questions.
How would you respond to fears that the evidence may have been tampered with?
Prove it. You see, that's the whole.
Boxes were found
the proof is in the servers, and you have refused to open.
Hold on,
You see, actually, that is. In fact, that brings me to another question which you had asked Mheshimiwa on my left, which had said, why didn't they cross petition in the technical jargon, cross petition and ask for scrutiny? Because you cross petition on something you disagree about. You don't have to prove your own case. The president and IEBC were comfortable with their numbers. They delivered them and he was declared. It was the petitioner who was not comfortable with those numbers. He then had to prove that allegation. The problem we have with the Supreme Court, and we respect the Supreme Court, that is why judgment has been agreed and implemented. The problem is, they then move, the moment the Honorable Raila Odinga alleges these allegations, just like the gentleman on my left, they immediately move to the conclusion that yes, we agree. Now, what they should have asked is, are you saying there is a fake result? Yes, prove it, my friend. Okay, I can't prove because I have been refused access. Is that proof? For example, say all of us are small-time traders in Kawangware, and we use one store for keeping our goods. I am, or he is, or one of the other parties alleged of theft. Who is related to assuming the person who keeps the key? If that person refuses to open the store so that you can prove your things have been, does that automatically prove this guy is a thief? No, it raises key questions.
It does.
But you need to go further then to adduce other evidence than that proof. So our problem is not with their questions. Our problem is, how do you jump from their questions to the results are fake? Because you have to, these are separate things. other than the fact that that process and substance also. Everywhere in the world, substance is more important than process. In our profession, we say process is the handmaiden of substance. In accounting, they say form and substance, substance trumps form. Even in your profession, Waigwa, you say content is king, because that is the substance. These others are processes are important, but they are supposed to help the substance. They are not supposed to be, everything is not supposed to be about. Finally, on Parliament.
Yes.
Finally, on Parliament, first of all, Parliament doesn't need the judiciary's permission to change laws. Just like the judiciary has the right to make interpret the law, Parliament has the mandate to make and amend laws. It doesn't need my permission. It doesn't need Justice Maranga's permission. Number two, all over the world, when a major decision is made, you then have to do other things to implement that decision. Maybe things to support, maybe things to clarify. So the best place, because those are political decisions, the best place for that is Parliament. Parliament is the best because you have all the political minds and people who have the mandate of the people in the same room, they discuss. Now, the two gentlemen on the left have talked about the president a number of times. Let me say this about the party in the minority. You see, you cannot delegitimize every institution you disagree with. Parliament is for legislation. NASA is in the minority on Parliament. So the fact that this matter is going to Parliament or Parliament wants to do something about it is illegitimate as far as NASA is concerned. Why? Because they have less numbers. But that's the reality of democracy. The reason why Justice Njoki's decision, however well argued, is not the decision of the court, but it is the majority's decision, is because of exactly the same basis. Okay. 4 versus 2. So Parliament has that. But let me finalize by saying this.
Yes.
The Honorable former Prime Minister Raila came out of the court and immediately made a number of very critical demands on the IEBC. Because Mheshimiwa said the IEBC was not let off the hook. The IEBC officers were not indicted. Now, if you are an officer in the election management body, you are the one who is supposed to carry that responsibility. The party on the minority is not the prosecutor. The Honorable Raila Odinga is not a procurement officer. He is not a prosecutor. Okay. He is not the IEBC. IEBC is independent. The I in IEBC stands for independent. You cannot at the one point say we have no interest in the rule of law, that person should be in jail. For you to be in jail, there's a whole lot of process before that. You have no interest in the rule of law when it doesn't serve you, but when it serves you, you are all for our constitution, the rule of law, all those high-sounding.
I think you've made your point. I need to warn my guests that I have less than 5 minutes, so I need to give each of you a chance to make your closing remarks. I'll start with the Honorable Kello.
Well, thank you. By introduction of foreign materials in the IEBC server by people who are illegally engaged into this electoral theft, could somebody make a negative inference that is why Musando was killed? Number two, the results were actually announced before the forms were veiled, and the forms 3 days later, when a letter was written to the IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba, he did indicate that they had not received the forms yet. 3 days ago, results had been announced and Uhuru Kenyatta declared president of the country. So these are fundamental issues that have to be addressed. You have to remember, Wahiga, that the Constitution gives IEBC 7 days upon which to declare presidential candidates. And this particular constitutional requirement was not born out of mischief. It was born out of the mere fact that somebody may rush, just as they did, to say that we are running short of time, even though the forms are not available, we are proceeding to announce so-and-so as the president of Kenya. That was the mischief this was meant to cure. Well, as the Deputy Chief Justice, Philomena Mwilu, did say, even when you have to reach a mathematical solution, you must indicate how you came to that particular conclusion. I remember when we were in school several years ago, somebody could straight away choose B, which could actually be the right answer, but again the teacher will confront you to say with certainty how then you came to the conclusion that B is actually the answer. So we are not going to bandage figures here and say Uhuru won by 8.4 million. Yet we are at pains to even prove beyond any reasonable doubt how those figures were arrived at. I want you to know that IEBC is the conveyor belt to exercising sovereignty of the people of Kenya. And the Constitution in Article 1, Sub-Article 2 says that that sovereignty, of course enjoyed by Kenyans, can be exercised by duly, and I want you to underline the word duly, duly elected leaders. So the process by which the word duly comes into being is a credible, transparent, verifiable process.
Okay,
so we will not, let me finish.
Please, briefly.
IEBC, you remember, objected in court in collusion with IEBC on opening of the servers. If indeed everything was clear, why were they finding it very difficult to allow these servers to be open so that the truth could ultimately be known? Finally, you know, we listen pensively to Njoki Ndung'u's dissenting opinion, and that is her democratic right, that is her constitutional right, and that is not a new phenomenon. I mean, judges have consistently dissented since time immemorial. But you listened to the content which my brother was saying here as regards to the media. I mean, they were laced on trivialities. They were based on criticizing her fellow judges. They were not. They were based on reports by observers, some of whom have backpedaled and said, "We apologize to Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga." Then they say there are certain fundamental changes that indeed need to be done within IEBC. So we are not going to rely on Njoki Ndung'u's verdict or rather decision.
I think you've
that
made your
fell
point.
short of the expectation of the Kenyan people.
Thank you, Honorable Elachi. Closing statement.
Thank you very much. First, I would wish to just say the following. One, as a country, I think where we have reached, I want to tell the politicians, we are tired of listening for both two names, and I think we want to move forward as a country to ensure we do these elections and Kenya moves on. You realize we've been in elections for the last 2 years, and the issues that were raised indeed in court, and I want to thank Justice Njoki Ndung'u. Njoki will be vilified because your name is Kikuyu. That is too sad for you.
Oh, Yuan is low.
But at the same time, one of the things we must learn from that process is that she was able to make Kenyans understand. One, while we go back to these elections, we will use the same process that we used on the 8th of August. What we need to do as both political divides is go out there and now convince Kenyans to come out with the same numbers. What I want to ask both NASA especially is whether we want this process now to be real manual. And I think Moi was very smart when he went to Mlolongo, because sometimes when you reach at a level like this, Wahiga, you prefer even the Mlolongo so that you count the people. And I'm hoping that is what NASA is going to do. Let us not do a lot of boardroom things, and then now when it comes to the exact process again, we find ourselves in the same process.
Public participation.
Yes, that we don't have numbers. We want to see now the numbers. And three, as they go to Parliament, there are few things they'll have to deal with. Yes, there were issues that were raised. We have the gaps, yes. It is for Parliament to also advise the country whether we are able to get a few of those gaps sorted before the 26th of October. Lastly, I think when we talk so much as elites, we forget that we have a belt that is very emotional. We forget that Kenya is in a country where at this time, if we are not careful, we can find ourselves in a brink that we will regret, all of us. And I just want to tell the judges, as much as we do all this for the sake of our country and the Constitution, I think that is why we are African. And I can see Americans are, that's why they are whites. And you find that they are able to understand beyond us that whether it was Hillary and Trump, today America has moved on. And I hope Africa, I realize why we have man-made tornadoes, which are human beings, where you can bring your country down, and yet other people are praying to be in Africa because of the hurricane. So can we stop bringing artificial hurricanes in our countries Africa.
Noted, noted. Odoyo, go ahead, briefly.
I want to address Kenyans briefly. The very reason why presidential elections are a highly fought contest is because of the behavior of the past presidents. When the presidents take power and move into office, the only people they see are their tribesmen and cronies. This is the reason why every tribe fights that our person has to be here. If we had a president who would get into office and look at Kenya and see all Kenyans and say, okay, let me send these 2 positions to the west, these 3 to the south, these 4 to the central, these 6 to the north, and this 1 to the south. Kenya would be a place where you would not care very much who is the president. Nevertheless, we are going to go back to the elections. For these elections to stand the test of the constitution, we must go with 2 key things that were missing in this one. Transparency. It was impossible for anyone, including the very president who won, which votes came from where. So there was no transparency. And 2, there was no verifiability. If you say, okay, I saw the votes in this constituency were 69,000. How do I prove that these 69,000 are part of the total being used to declare the president? That was impossible. And it is important for us to note that Raila Odinga did not go to court to contest the difference between his votes and Uhuru Kenyatta's. He went to contest the validity of the votes that were used to declare Uhuru Kenyatta the president.
Thank you.
So for us to go into a clear election accepted by all, we need agents even at the ICT centers for all candidates.
Thank you so much. Honorable Mohammed, 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. And I think going forward, the first thing we must understand is that we have systems, we have institutions, we have processes that we have gone through as a country many times. This is not the first presidential election. This is not the first election. Of course, we are in uncharted territories as far as a repeat presidential election is concerned. But these are processes we have done. They are not really outside the norm in terms. It's still an election. Number 2, every election must have a winner or a loser. If you decide that I will never accept this result unless I am the winner. Trump, I'm told, the current president of America one time famously made that remark, I will only accept the results if I am the winner. If that is the case, then we are in for trouble. Let us deal with our processes through our institutions, whether it be the Supreme Court, whether it be IEBC, whether it be Parliament. And as far as the IEBC is concerned, remember, it is the same institution that created, or through their process that created our National Assembly in terms of the elections, our National Assembly, our Senate, our MCS, and they are all serving. I think our focus should be how to hold the next elections, because we have very few days to the elections. It should not be how to prepare to delegitimize those elections, which seem to be what the party in the opposition is doing. I think as a country we need to pull together and move towards that direction. Point scoring will really not help. Brinkmanship will not help us, and grandstanding certainly has never helped any country.
Thank you so much for those words, and I certainly hope the IEBC are listening, especially to the last 10 or 20 minutes of this particular panel discussion, as each of my panelists gave their thoughts on what IEBC needs to do, what they need to see for them to believe that the upcoming elections will be free, fair, credible, transparent, and verifiable as well. Thank you so much to everyone who took time to write in as well on 22422 and at Citizen TV Kenya. Kenyans with lots of questions about the upcoming process, with the country in a place that it has never been before, and of course certainly hoping that the bodies that are involved in the upcoming election will manage it properly, just to ensure that we find a way out of the situation that we are in. Many thanks indeed to my guests who woke up bright and late to be here with us. Odoyo Owili, political analyst, Honorable Okello, Honorable Elachi, Honorable Mohammed, many thanks indeed. We'll carry on with these discussions later on, but for now we take a short break right here on the Power Breakfast Show. Willis Raburu is up next. Many thanks indeed. Keep it Citizen TV.